So I think we're just gonna get started. It's 5:35. I want to welcome you guys all to Ynot's mental health workshop. We are joined here again with Dr. Blackwood. I know you guys have all missed his insightful talks and his tips. I know I have been using them. Please keep on joining in to our further workshops in mental health. I know we have a few more coming up. So please don't miss out. And I'm just going to give the floor to Dr. Blackwood.
Thank you so very much, Saida.
No problem.
Yes, I'm already a co-host, so I'll be able to share my screen. I am so happy to be here with everybody on this. Well, it's a little bit rainy here, and I know some people will be watching the playback, so I'm hoping you're experiencing some sun, maybe even some warm weather where you are, especially in light of what we're going to be talking about. We're talking about forgiveness, which for many people is like it's a really bad word. It's like the F word. It's a really bad word for a lot of people, which is part of the reason why I like to laugh about it, to lighten the weight and ease the tension. But as we are human beings, we are all relational. I believe we were created this way. Our relationships matter. And if you are in relationships with other people, there's bound to be hurt. There's bound to be pain. And we're not always prepared for it. We're not always prepared for it. And it comes in all shapes and sizes. And as I thought about being with you all tonight, I was thinking about which story of forgiveness I would share. And the one that came to mind for me was an interesting one. For those of you who don't know, my parents are Jamaican. So many of the people from the Caribbean islands, they've experienced this staged migration kind of experience where in search of a better life, and upward mobility, success, education, those kinds of things. The parents would sometimes leave their children at home, wherever home is for them, and they would travel abroad for work, and they would end up living there. And then once they got settled in a career, they would send back for their children. So in the meantime, their children would be raised by their parents. So you have children, apart from their parents, but knowing their grandparents as their parents. And as much as that has been a thing, and with good intentions, there's often hurt that comes along with that. These generational patterns of progress. And I'm just going to mute everybody here. Yeah, so there's these generational patterns of hurt that we experience. And my understanding of hurt and transgenerational processes is that if we never address it, we never really heal. And then that gets passed on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And we have some assumptions about relationships that just because you're family, that means you will be close, or because you're family, you will know how to relate to each other. But when you have this gap in relationship, sometimes you don't learn how to relate, and you don't learn how to connect. You don't learn how to support the people who need you most in very emotional ways. So several years ago, I was actually quite upset with my grandparents. Really, really upset with my grandparents, because I live in Canada and I see all these people with their grandparents, their grannies, their omas, their nanas, their nunus. Everybody's got somebody. At least that's what it looked like growing up. They would bake them cookies and they would do this with them, and I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of that, and I was bitter. I was upset about it. And growing up, even when my kids were born, and there was no real relationship between them and their great grandparents, and I was upset about this. And one day, as often happens, I heard this prompting. It's like, call your grandparents and forgive them. And usually I argue with the prompting. I'm like, forgive them for what? We haven't spoken. And when we do, it's superficial. And I lost the argument, with God. I usually do. So I ended up calling and I spoke to my grandparents and I actually apologized and I let them know that, I've been upset because we haven't been as close as I wanted to. And their response was okay. To be honest with you, I don't think they really understood what I was really saying because they probably didn't have what I was looking for. And it's very difficult for people to give what it is that they haven't received. Um, so I was still a little disappointed with a lack of resolution, but at least I got something off my chest. And would you believe the very next day, my grandfather died? The very next day. And for me, as much as there wasn't a lot of resolution, there was a sense of relief because I wasn't carrying this with me anymore. I did my part. I did my part. And we're going to do things a little bit different today. Normally, I do a lot of talking and I share a presentation and I wait till the end to, you know, uh, have you engage with me. But we're going to do things a little bit different today because we're talking about something that I think is really, really personal and very important. So I would love for you to make use of the chat. And I'm actually going to try to pay attention to it as we move through today, through our talk today. So forgiveness, like I said, is something that we all have heard of, and most of us probably don't enjoy it. We don't look forward to it. But as relational beings, we're going to be in relationship with other people who are imperfect. We are going to experience hurt. We're going to experience pain. And whenever there is hurt and pain, there's also room for forgiveness. There's room for forgiveness. So I want to know from you all, do you all think that forgiveness is a good thing? If you think it's good, I want you to use the chat. Say yes, put yes in the chat if you think forgiveness is a good thing. You can say, no, I don't think forgiveness is a good thing. And you could also say, you know what, maybe forgiveness is a little bit good and maybe a little bit not so good. I just want to get a read on the room. What do you all think? Is forgiveness good? Okay, I'm seeing yes, it's a very good thing. You see, and it's hard sometimes, but yes, it is a good thing. Okay, someone else says yes. So we've got some yeses, and I haven't seen anybody say no. And I remember I was actually shocked the first time when I heard someone say that forgiveness is not a good thing. It's not even a necessary thing at all. And in my experience of doing this work with people for over 18 years, there are a lot of people who carry things with them and it impacts their mental health. It impacts their mental health. So the pain that they feel from hurts that have been unaddressed, they carry them with bitterness. Like I said, I was bitter. I was bitter. And you can survive with unforgiveness in your heart, but it changes you. It changes the way that you relate to other people. It's a stressor that you live with. It's a stressor that you carry. So, do you all think there's a connection between mental health and a lack of forgiveness? I mean, there are studies out there that say so, but I want to know what you all think. What are some of the things that you see in people's lives that when they don't forgive, what happens to them? What do you think happens to people? What have you seen? What have you experienced personally? And sometimes we get to make some stretches, let's say. We get to make some connections that might not be so obvious. Okay. Anything you guys have seen? And I know this might be a little challenging to talk about, but when we don't talk about things, we just hold on to them. You can tell that I've been in this work for a while. So let me make some connections for you. Sometimes we don't forgive and relationships end. And they don't end on good terms, whether it's divorce, whether it is somebody just leaving the family, there's abandonment, we don't forgive. And then we get into new relationships. And then we find that this pattern repeats. The very same thing that you left or tried to leave happens again. And we're left confused. And then we leave again. And the same pattern happens again and again and again and again. How does this impact our mental health? People are confused. People are sad. People are depressed. When we don't experience change and we don't experience growth, we become stagnant. Anything that's alive is going to grow. But just because it's growing doesn't mean that it's growing in a healthy way. You can grow in a very unhealthy way. You can have attitudes and dispositions that come along with unforgiveness that make life very hard, right? Sure, yes, people become very bitter. People become very bitter, not just with other people, they become bitter about life, okay? People get hatred, right? People experience hatred in unforgiveness, not just with individuals, with people groups, right? People think racism is just about color or ethnicity and all these things. Well, guess what? There's a lot of unforgiveness tied up in racism too. There's a lot. We have these beliefs about the world as a result of our experiences. You can wake up and be upset and bitter about the day, and you might not realize this is not just about the day in general. This is about a specific outlook that I've taken on as a result of the pain that I'm in. Pain, emotional pain is, we can learn a lot about emotional pain from our physical pain. Right now, I have a sore right foot. It's really sore. And it is sore because years ago, I injured my Achilles and injured my ankle. So I lost the arch in my foot, in my feet, both feet actually, over time because of that injury. And as a result of that injury, when I walk, I put most of the pressure on the outside of my foot. So it develops a callus there. I don't have a callus on any other part of my foot, but because my weight isn't distributed properly, I'm feeling pain. The body compensates, right? And now because I'm feeling pain on this side of my foot, I'm compensating and I'm putting the pain, the weight on the rest of my foot because this foot is sore. Now that's causing pain in my right knee. So I have something wrong with my left ankle, which led to a problem with my left, near my left toe, which led to a problem with my right knee, and on and on and on it goes. Forgiveness is the same way. A lack of forgiveness, bitterness in our heart, it impacts the way that we think. It impacts the way that we feel. Can you go to work with bitterness in your heart, even if it's unrelated? Are you going to be a happy, positive person? If so, how long do you think it's going to last? How long do you think it's going to last? Not very long. The connections might not be obvious, but it's important for us to think about the challenges that we face and experience in our lives and ask ourselves, where is this coming? When our children are upset with us, they're holding grudges with us. Sometimes they learn that from us. Okay, we can pass these things on to the next generation. And many of us might agree that it's important. It's important to forgive. But like someone said earlier, it is not so easy. It is not so easy. And why don't people just let it go? Why don't you just let it go? Have you ever seen somebody in your life, ever met somebody in your life, and they just would not let it go? I won't name any names because some of the people in my life, they might be on the call and they might watch the video. So I won't put any names out there. But I know somebody who, every time we get together, the conversation may go to this emotional place and they recall the past and this thing comes up again. This thing comes up again. And it's as if they feel it like it happened yesterday. And one might ask, why don't they just let it go? Sometimes there's this tug of war, right? Sometimes this tug of war. Okay. There's this tug of war, and sometimes it's not just you and somebody else. You're not observing this between you, somebody else, and their issue. Sometimes this tug of war is internal. We have a hard time letting it go. It's so difficult to let go. I'm reading this comment here because when you're trying to forgive them, they do something even worse. Yes, I get it. I get it. In fact, you know what? Let's look at this together. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to share another screen. Hopefully my tech will cooperate with me. Okay, I'm going to do something else a little bit different. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this here. All right. I like to do this exercise with people. Okay, so I'm going to draw on my screen and you can still throw some things in the chat. Forgiveness is hard. What makes forgiveness hard? Okay. Sometimes people do things again. Okay. What else makes forgiveness hard? Why do we struggle with it? Right? Some people do things again, or they do things that are even worse. I'm curious. What experiences have you all had? If you've struggled with forgiveness, what makes forgiveness hard?
To me, Doc, to me, it's fear of probably the same thing will happen again. Fear.
Okay. Fear. Yes, that's a good thing. Good, right? A good point you mentioned. Fear that it will happen again. Okay.
Unsure of the person's next step, like what would the person do next, like, kind of you put a guard around yourself, around your heart, once bitten twice shy, kind of a thing.
Okay, so this is okay, so you are unsure what will happen next, right? If you forgive. So it's a way to protect yourself.
Yes. The next point there is sometimes forgiveness. Some people that you acknowledge that you are wrong, or that you're at fault.
Say that again, Pastor Francis.
Sometimes when you say you forgive, a lot of people interpret it as if you are at fault.
Oh, okay.
Most
So,
people
okay.
do not want to be in that position of being, maybe you are thinking you are right, and your action of want to forgive makes you to probably stand that you're at fault, that you caused the problem.
Okay. Right. Right.
Yeah, it can also put off as you being weak, you know. So you want to show that I'm not actually weak, I'm actually strong. So, it could be some of those things just trying to match up with the person's negative strength. So you put up your own guard. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you may appear weak. If you forgive, people may see it as you being at fault. Okay. Sometimes people feel forced
Yes.
or hurried to forgive.
Yes.
Ooh, what about this? You may still be hurting. Because for some people, it doesn't make sense to forgive, and I'm still in pain. I'm still angry. So why would I forgive? Or is it even possible for me to forgive when I'm still in pain? The deeper the hurt, I think it is, the harder it is to forgive. And maybe even the closer the relationship, the harder it is, right? Maybe our expectations of people sometimes makes it really hard to forgive. Of all people who would do this, you would do this to me, right? Love. Sometimes love makes it hard to forgive. It sounds like it doesn't make sense, but the people who are closest to you can hurt you the most. Forgiveness is hard. Forgiveness is hard. We came up with some really important factors here that make forgiveness hard, and believe it or not, I think we're going to address these. But I guess this fear thing stood out to me as well, because anxiety is at the core of a lot of our mental health challenges, and fear and anxiety, I use those terms interchangeably. But if we go through life being afraid that we're going to get hurt, if we go through life being unsure about what will happen next with people we're in a relationship with, right? It leaves us feeling vulnerable, hesitant, unsure. Sometimes we may even lack confidence. Our ability to trust, our ability to grow, our ability to move forward in life can be impaired. Okay, so we want to be mindful of that. We're going to go back to this presentation here and talk a little bit more about, there we go, forgiveness being a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. And the reason why I highlight this is because there's something empowering about being able to choose. So if you have somebody in your life who is experiencing unforgiveness and bitterness and all these things, I think it's great to encourage them to consider forgiveness. I think it's good to support people to go through, to have experiences of forgiveness, to decide to forgive. But when we tell them that they have to, that they need to, most people react in opposition to that. And this is, I believe this is why we are designed as creatures of choice. When we do not have choice, We do not feel empowered. We feel trapped. We feel forced. And most people will push against it. So as much as it may be good and healthy for us, if we tell people that they have to and they need to, they might not engage simply because we use that language and what it means to them. However, instead of telling people that they need to, we can invite them to consider, what do they believe are some of the benefits to forgiving? It's a different way to phrase the question, and it's a way to align with people, to harness the power of motivation. If someone doesn't want to do something, they're a lot less likely to do it. And we're going to talk a little bit now about some misconceptions that get in the way. Here are some misconceptions about forgiveness. Some people believe that they don't have to forgive. They don't need to forgive. There's no benefit in forgiving because time heals all wounds. I imagine many of you have heard this phrase before: time heals all wounds. And the reality is, time alone does not heal wounds. Time alone does not heal wounds. Because as you will see, there are some people who years have gone by, decades have gone by, even generations have gone by, and people are still fighting about stuff and they don't even know why they're fighting. Time alone does not heal wounds. If you've ever seen people argue and you watch someone leave and go away, some people might come back and feel a little bit different. But some people, they'll come back and they'll be even more upset. And those people who come back more upset, what do you think has been going on in their mind and in their heart while they've been away? They've been rehearsing the pain. They've been rehearsing the upset. They've been thinking about, how justified they are about being angry and how this person, and all these things may be true. But all that time that has passed, they've used it to really make things worse for themselves. That person who goes away and they come back feeling a little bit different, something besides time passing has happened for them. And again, I'd like to talk about physical wounds because we can learn a lot of truth from these very physical experiences. When you experience a cut and there's a wound, there's an injury, what happens as we address it and you put a bandage on it, you do whatever needs to happen there, you stitch it back together, you go through a process, but the cells themselves, the tissues, they're repairing themselves. We are designed to heal. There's stuff that we get to do, but our bodies are actually wanting to be better. They're wanting to heal. They're wanting to reattach. They're doing what's required for them to heal. So it's not time alone that makes things heal. There's work that happens. And when it comes to relationships, that work doesn't happen automatically. We get to attend to it. We get to address the wounds. We get to do our parts. The inner working is, what are we thinking about? What are we saying to ourselves? What are we just preparing ourselves to go back and fight back? And, what are you saying to yourself when you've been hurt? It's an important thing. Okay? So I do not believe time heals all wounds. Some people struggle to forgive because they think when they say, I forgive you, it means that it's okay. What happened to them is okay. What the person did is okay. And some people actually say that it is okay. When my children, I have 2 daughters, and when they get upset with each other and they want to re-engage and reconcile and forgive each other, sometimes one would apologize and the other would say it's okay. And if I'm within earshot, I remind them that it's not okay. You're not happy with what they did, so it's not okay. You might be okay. You might forgive them, but what they did was not okay. So forgiveness does not mean I'm saying it's okay. Forgiveness means I'm okay, or I will be okay. It's an important distinction. Some people think that you need to feel ready to forgive. And the reality is, you may never feel ready to forgive. If we wait for our emotions to tell us that now is a good time to forgive, we may never do it, which is why I acknowledge the opportunity to make the choice to forgive. Interestingly enough, when you go through the process, you make the choice, the feelings catch up. Okay, we'll get into that a little bit down the road, but it's the feelings won't always lead us to forgive. It's important that it's a choice. What about this one? It's for the other person's freedom. We are setting the other person free. And if we've been hurt, sometimes we don't want to do that. If you still want somebody to suffer for what they've done to you, then you're still very much early in the process of forgiveness. But the reality is, from my perspective, forgiveness is really about setting you free. Forgiveness is not about things being fair. Forgiveness is not about things being okay. Forgiveness is about you no longer allowing those things, those hurts, to define your life. It's about setting yourself free. Some people say you forgive for the sake of the relationship. And to me, I think that's a very unhealthy thing, to just assume that the relationship is going to get better because you forgive. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. The two are not the same. If you want the relationship to be healthy, yes, forgiveness is the first step. The apology is a second step. And forgiveness and reconciliation, that's the most important part. Forgiveness will not fix a relationship. To someone else's point, you forgive somebody and they can do the same thing again, maybe even worse. Forgiveness is not a welcome home statement and welcome back to relationship. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is saying that I'm okay. Okay? Some people believe you forgive and you forget. I think that is very wrong. Eventually, you might forget, but you don't forget in order to forgive. The opposite is true. You actually want to remember. I say it, forgive with eyes wide open. You want to remember. Yes, remembering brings up the pain again. Yes, it is important to deal with the pain. That is part of the process. And most people don't realize forgiveness is a process. Similar to grieving, there are 7 steps. Well, some people say 5, some people say 12, to the grief kind of cycle. And in my work with people, and as I've thought about this and prayed about this and experienced this, there are 7 phases of forgiveness that are really important. So we make a decision, but there's also a process. And some of you might be able to appreciate this. We start in denial. Some of us, we're like, man, there's nothing to forgive. And there could be so many reasons why we think that there's nothing to forgive. Well, what happened to me is not a big deal. Worse things have happened to other people, or sometimes it's so painful that we don't even want to consider it. And then there's the acceptance. We actually accept, okay, something did happen and it wasn't okay. And then sometimes when we get to that point, we're saying, I refuse to forgive. And a lot of the times, the refusal to forgive has everything to do with those misconceptions we were talking about. If I forgive this person, that means they're going to come back in my life. I have to let them back in my life. Or it means that, they're not going to deal with any consequences for what they've done. That's what forgiveness is. Not necessarily. When we hold those beliefs, then we will refuse to forgive. And then that's when we lock ourselves into that really unhealthy state. Now, once we realize, okay, you know what, forgiveness is actually an important thing that I want to engage in, that's where we come into alignment. Because part of us knows we're not doing well. not just as a result of the instance that we could forgive, but the fact that we choose not to forgive is keeping us where we are in the state that we're in. So we come into alignment. And this is where we move into awareness. Awareness is critical when it comes to forgiveness, not just of what forgiveness means, but there's a parallel process between forgiveness and grieving. Where there is significant hurt, there will be loss. And where there's loss, there is grief. And when we grieve, you will find that there's something to forgive. Okay? There's loss, forgiveness. They're connected. We want to be aware of what we've lost. When I talk about loss, you have the instant incident, okay? Then yes, you have the emotional, physical impact, right? But then you have the reality of the impact. So the incident is like a drop of something in the water. You drop pebble in the water, stone in the water, then there's ripple effects. The impact is the ripple effect that goes on and on and on and on. We want to be aware of the impact. What have I lost as a result of what this person did? This is how it impacted me, not just today, because there will be an impact down the road. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, the next generation. And some people think we forgive once, but I've learned that you can forgive the same incident multiple times. I call them invitations to forgive again and again and again. But each time we forgive, we have a new awareness. We move to another level of recognition of loss. It might not sound good, but it's healthy. It is healthy. And I'll give you an example. If you grow up and you grew up without a father, your childhood was impacted. But then your teen years were impacted because you didn't have, the father to guide you. Then let's say you get married. If, some traditions, your father gives you away. You didn't have that. Then you have a child. Then that child doesn't have a grandfather, right? Then that child has a child. Do you see there are ripple effects? And we think because we've forgiven once, we're good. I'm not saying that will never happen to people, but similar to when someone dies, you might be triggered again. You might see somebody who looks like them. You might watch a show that reminds you. You might hear music. You might smell, a fragrance or a food that reminds you of that person. There are going to be things that come up again. So we want to be prepared to forgive again. When we acknowledge things, we acknowledge the loss. And here's the thing that we really don't recognize about loss. Loss is not just about the past. Grief and loss impacts the future. Because when we really think about what we've lost, in that moment, we come to conclusions about ourselves, about life, about the future. Because this happened to me, I will never, and then you fill in the blanks. I will never be able to, no one will ever. And these are the kinds of things that happen in a very deep place in us. And it shapes our life. It contributes to our mental health. This is what we want to become aware of. And grief and loss is so personal, which makes forgiveness very, very personal. When I work with people, people aren't aware of why things bother them so much and why they won't let it go. And in some cases, it's really good that they're having trouble letting it go because there's a part of them that says, I want this to be acknowledged. And sometimes we look for acknowledgement from the wrong person. Sometimes we hold on to unforgiveness because we want the person who hurt us to acknowledge it. And logically, I get it. But the truth is, their opinion, their acknowledgement is not as important as your own. Your acknowledgement of your own pain is the most important acknowledgement. It is the most important acknowledgement. When you acknowledge your own pain and your own loss, you're actually validating it. You're saying this happened and this matters to me. And only you can understand why it bothers you and hurts you the way that it does. A person who hurt you, they probably might not be able to. They may never own it. They might be dead and gone, but you're still here. When you realize what it is that you not only lost, but what you believe that it will do to your life, there's a degree of hopelessness that we carry with us. When we look at those things, we actually tend to use these all or nothing ways of thinking. I will never be happy. I will never have a good life. And when we come to the realization, actually, that not everything that we believe is true, we start to realize, oh, yes, that was painful. Yes, it had an impact, but that doesn't have to determine the rest of my life. I can actually be happy. I can actually move forward in a way that is good and that is fruitful and life-giving. There is hope for me. I have a future. When we realize this level of awareness, that's what helps us say, you know, I'm actually okay. I will be okay. I'm good. What you did wasn't good, but I'm okay. It's when we go through this process of awareness, we start to experience a degree of healing. And then I think it's healthiest to move into empathy. We start to unpack how did this happen and what was going on in the other person's life. Because some people, they do this empathy piece before they do their own grieving, and it messes things up. Some people think, again, forgiveness is, you know, just excusing what other people have done. And some people don't want to do that, but some people habitually do that. They make excuses, which is different than an explanation. We don't want to let people back into our lives just because we understand where they're coming from. That's not reconciliation. It's important that people are ready for reconciliation. So we want to empathize so we can be healthy. We can maybe even re-engage, but we don't want to reinstate people to their former position of closeness and trustworthiness in our lives, because if they haven't demonstrated readiness, okay, signs for readiness, some examples might be, did they take ownership? Are they blaming you? Are they they're blaming other people? Are they looking at their own lives to say, okay, you know, this is what I'm going to do differently? Are they investing in a process of change? If they're not ready for reconciliation. And I would say, don't trust them. Don't do it. You can forgive them, but don't trust them. Allow people to prove themselves as trustworthy. Okay? And it's not just time. There's work that they can do. Okay? We move from awareness to empathy, and then we start to experience healing and that growth. Okay. Now, these arrows, as you can see, sometimes we cycle through things and we bounce here and bounce there, but it's good to be aware of the process so we can be intentional. It is a process. I love telling people that there is healing right here for you. There is healing for you. It is a process. It's a choice and it's a process. Okay. I'm going to we're going to switch gears because I know I'm moving through a lot of this really quickly. But if there are questions, I definitely would love to hear them. And we have, you know, a little bit of time so I can respond. One of the common questions that I get is, there's so many things that I have not yet worked through. Can you help me? And I'm like, yes, I certainly can help you work through these things. There's coaching for sure. And then I have a book called The Art of a Genuine Apology. I talk a little bit about forgiveness there. I have an online course. you can go on my site, you could access the online course for the book. We talk a little bit about forgiveness, but there's a process that we can go through, and it is structured so you can answer some questions for yourself, increase that awareness, and then move through the process. So yes, it is possible to heal. Is there anything that is unforgivable? Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I think that it depends on you. If you say it's unforgivable for you, then it will be unforgivable. But we know people have done some really horrendous things, and God forgives them. Their victims have forgiven people who've hurt them, who killed their relatives. Forgiveness is a thing. It is a real thing. Are there any other questions? You're welcome to unmute if you do have a question, or you can raise your hand and I will come to you, or you can just throw it in the chat. We've already talked about some of the benefits of forgiving, but why would you forgive? Well, once again, we choose to forgive and we start to move through a process so you can see your life differently, so you can be aware of the beliefs that you've been holding as a result of the pain that you've experienced. We move through this process of forgiveness. We choose to go through this forgiveness because what you do on the inside matters. Your healing is up to you. It is not up to another person. Some people, they hold on to their pain and they hold on to their unforgiveness, and the other person is living life. They've moved on. But then you're stuck here holding the bag, holding the pain. Forgiveness is a way to free yourself. So does forgiveness make the past go away? That's a very good question. What do you think? No, you can't change the past. You can't change the past. Forgiveness is not about changing the past. And forgiveness isn't actually just about the past. Forgiveness is more about the future than we think. You can't change the past, but you can carry it with you differently. Everybody in this world comes from people who are imperfect, and we have baggage. Everybody's got baggage. Some of us have, a 3-piece. Some of us have 10-piece of luggage. Some of us have, a U-Haul filled with baggage. And the process of grieving helps us to look through the bags, sort through it, put it in piles. I got this from this. I got this from you. This came from grandpa. This came from grandma. This came from a neighbor. This came from mom. And if you imagine like articles of clothing, some of them, they don't fit. They're not even the right size. They don't belong to you. Some of them are torn, tattered. Some of them you actually want to keep. Some of these things, you know what? I want to remember this. Some of that stuff belongs to us. We even talk a lot about forgiving oneself. Believe it or not, it's a very similar process. Sometimes we blame ourselves for things that other people have done to us. We put ourselves in this situation. And I know that there are schools of thought that, say that you are responsible for everything that happens in your life. That is an absolute, and I don't think it's true. Sure, we might contribute to certain things happening in our lives. Sure, we can own that. But if someone has hurt us, they didn't hurt us, because of who we are. People treat people based on who they themselves are, and where they are in their lives, and the things that have happened to them. So those are two aspects of forgiveness that you really want to sort through. What do you want to forgive yourself for? What are you having trouble forgiving yourself about? And what makes it hard to forgive others? These are really, really important questions. I definitely want to know what your thoughts are about this. If this conversation is, if there's another question, you're welcome to open up and share it. But I want
Yes, Doctor, I have a question here. So sometimes the word forgiveness, as you said, is a very complex issue, and sometimes people can look at it from cultural concepts because it has some cultural differences when it has to do with forgiveness. So in a situation, my question here, in a situation that somebody offended you and at the same time holding malice against you because he thought that you offended them instead of them understanding that they offended you. For instance, most of us here from third world, a lot of our people back home, they hardly understand how tough and how rough it is in this part of the world. And they expect us to be sending money or sending things to them that we pick money from the street. And when you don't do that, they hold it against you. Some of them don't talk to you. Some of them don't relate to you because you own them something. So in a situation like that, how do you interpret that?
I still think it's relevant. Forgive them for they know not what they do. People don't know what they're talking about. Whether or not they are upset with you or have a reason to be upset with you, that won't stop you from forgiving them. Whether or not they forgive you or ever talk to you again does not deny you of the opportunity to forgive them. I
So,
still think it's relevant.
yes, forgiving them on what? When they decide to hold malice on you on what you didn't do. So what are you forgiving them on?
In that situation, they might be misjudging you, right? They might think you're being unkind. They might think poorly of you. They don't know the situation. They haven't had the experience. So they're unfairly having these expectations of you. And that can hurt. I think those are some of the worst kinds of hurts, where people misjudge you and they assassinate your character. They don't know what your experience is like, but yet they're judging you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we can forgive. We can release that. We can say, I know who I am. I know who I am. God knows who I am. People they may continue to misjudge you and no longer and deprive you of relationship with them. It's a loss, right? You're already away from home. You're probably having challenges in community. It would be lovely to have healthy relationship with people back home, and they're depriving you of that. They're basically trying to force you to take care of them beyond what you're able to do, and then they're criticizing you on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's hurtful. Of course, that's something to forgive. Again, we're not excusing it. We're saying that hurts me, so I'm going to forgive that. I'm going to choose to do that.
But if they are the one that stopped communicating with you, so because they believe you offended them, they're not talking about them offending you.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to continue the relationship because deep down you know that you haven't done anything wrong to them. But they chose not to have anything to do with you because within themselves they are convinced in their heart
Right.
that you have deprived them. That's because they're in that state of entitlement.
Yeah.
What you define that entitlement.
Well, so again, what we're talking about are two different things. Sounds like you're talking a little bit about reconciliation. That's very different than forgiveness. You can forgive someone, and they don't even know. You don't have to tell them you forgive them. That's something in your heart that you're releasing,
Yeah.
right? You can definitely pray and anticipate them maturing or having some sort of change of heart and experience. And when they're ready, you can address them, you can talk to them, you can reach out to them. That's your choice. But reconciliation is very different. You can't force,
Yes.
right? You can't force someone to acknowledge that they're wrong. You can't.
Yes, Doctor, which I learned from you about the reconciliation and the forgiveness. But the way we are brought up, we join them together. It's one thing to us. And that's the way I was brought up. That when you forgive somebody, then the relationship continues. And then when you don't forgive, it means when you claim that you forgive, but the relationship is no longer this whole lot of, the forgiveness is not real. So, and again, that the way I relate it back to the cultural definition of what forgiveness is all about. So, to us, when you forgive somebody and the relationship is no longer there, it means it's not forgiven.
Mm,
So,
yeah,
that's
that understanding of forgiveness, it would make you responsible for the entirety of the relationship. And that's just not realistic, right? I do believe, I do believe in prayer. I do believe in hoping and being positive and having, wherever possible, to have goodwill in your heart for other people, to want them to do well. Like, we can do that, but we can't force someone to understand where they're wrong. We can't force somebody to admit, you know, where they can grow. So reconciliation isn't just about, some people think, saying sorry is a way to keep the peace. And that's not peace. That's not peace. You might be saving face. You might be kind of making it look like you're okay again. But deep down, let's be honest, we know things aren't good. There are a lot of people who live together, but they're not really married. Legally, they're married, but their hearts are not one anymore. There's a difference between staying together and being reconciled. Staying together, yes, there are some benefits, but peace really means wholeness. It means being healed, it means coming together. And sometimes it's important to recognize where we disagree so that we can actually address the issues. Until that happens, until somebody's ready, they're mature enough to do that, we're not really going to experience true reconciliation.
I agree with you, though. I agree with you 100%. And sometimes that's the problem most of us Christians find ourselves, that we think that we combine we combine forgiveness with relationship, and we attached relationship to forgiveness, and the things thinking that we can change how the other person behaves or what you think about the situation, but that's not what forgiveness is all about. I agree with you 100%.
Mhm. I appreciate you acknowledging that cultural understanding, and it's important to unpack it so that we choose how we are going to be, and the levels of safety that we have in our relationships, because sometimes we have this understanding that the right thing to do is to forgive, and we assume that that means we take whatever kind of treatment comes along with that you know so many people stay in abusive situations because they believe they're supposed to, because that's what forgiveness does. And that's not always the case. Very rarely is that the case. I like to explain it this way. There's a difference between torture and sacrifice. There's a difference between torture and sacrifice. Torture is what somebody does to you. Sacrifice is what you allow. It's what you surrender to. And when we surrender, it's important to do this with a full awareness of what it's going to cost. We don't just do it automatically. And those of you know me know I come from a Christian perspective and think about Jesus's sacrifice. That yes, it was torturous, but it was a sacrifice. He knew what he was paying, but he also knew the end result. He also knew the outcome. There was intention behind that. There was power and there was authority in that kind of forgiveness. And a lot of the times we don't experience forgiveness that way. Right? We just, like somebody else was saying, there's this uncertainty, what will happen next? And we're living in this anxiety because it's not healthy. And then we just endure and we just take whatever is coming our way. And I don't believe that is healthy. I really don't believe that's a healthy definition and experience of forgiveness. Like I said before, I know that forgiveness is personal and there's an element of grieving. And when we talk like this, yes, these ideas, I think they're relevant. I think they're helpful, but sometimes it may require digging it in or having a deeper conversation to see how, if and how it's relevant and how it applies to your situation. So I'm in no means rushing you through the process, but I do want to highlight that there is a healthy process that you can go through, regardless of what has happened in your life. More important than what has happened in our lives is how we respond to it, how we recover from it. And if you believe you cannot recover, once again, that's a belief, and not all of our beliefs are true. So I would love to make myself available to be of support if I can. All right, and I'll hand it back over to you, either Pastor Francis or Saida. And
yes, Doctor, can I ask this question? Can somebody mistakenly surrender himself or herself to torture, thinking that is sacrifice?
I'm sure everything is possible. Yeah, and that's where the whole discernment and maturity piece comes in. Yeah, because what looks like torture to me might actually be sacrifice. So I do think it's important to, like I said, to really take these things and look at them, unpack them. And I do believe there is wise counsel, and it's good for us to be in community with wise counsel as we sort through these things. Because sometimes when we're in the middle of a situation, our perspective isn't always so clear. Okay, there's another hand. You can go ahead and unmute, Joy, and ask your question.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My question is it okay if you forgive someone without calling the person, letting the person know that you forgive, but you just forgive the person and you move ahead? Is it okay?
Is it okay? I think I like to ask questions of myself and other people. So the question is it healthy? And what's the motivation? What's the reason for not engaging? There could be many reasons. So in a situation where the person might not be a safe person, sure, that might be really okay not to do it. In a situation where years have gone by and that person's life has moved on and you reconnecting might open up other stuff, that might be okay to not do it. But again, we want to use discernment and be prayerful and be intentional that way. So it's not yes or no to reconnecting or not. I do think there are other questions to ask, so it can be okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. You're so welcome. All right. Thank you for your contributions to this conversation. So very appreciative of it, and your questions, and your time and your attention. And yeah, I trust that you will continue to learn, heal, and grow.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blackwood. Just wanted to give thanks to Dr. Blackwood for joining us again with this wonderful conversation. I know I've had a lot of takeaways, and you guys seem to be enjoying the topic today as well. So don't miss out on our other workshops to come. I know Dr. Blackwood will be joining us. I think these conversations are really important, especially with a trained professional like Dr. Blackwood. So don't miss out. Tell a friend, tell anybody that you may think may benefit from these topics. And if you guys are not on our list, please put your emails down below so you guys can be contacted anytime that we have a workshop coming up. And so you guys don't miss out.
Bye, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's always educative and healing whenever we come together. Whenever I have the time to listen to you, it's always doing something. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, you're
Thank
so very welcome. So very welcome.
Doctor, thank you
Alright.
so much. Thank you so
See
much.
you.
God bless you.
All right, God bless you too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Dr. Blackwood. Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye.